Welcome to the Texas Talks podcast. I'm your host, Brad Swale. Today, I'm joined with Steve Bruno, the Deputy Executive Director of the Licensing and Education and Examination Divisions and Customer Service at the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. Steve, how are you?
I'm great, Brad. Thank you for having me today. It's really nice to be here.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to speak with you. I think that I get an opportunity to talk to people like you with dealing with.
Excellent.
Yeah, I always enjoy talking to people like you that are in positions that aren't always necessarily public facing, right? And get to learn more about what you guys do and all that stuff. So I'm excited to talk to you. And I know you guys have a new 5-year strategic plan that I'm excited to talk about. But let's start with the basics.
Sure.
So, give us a little bit of background on who you are and sort of how you got involved with the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation.
Sure. Well, again, I'm Steve Bruno, Deputy Executive Director here at TDLR. And I began my journey in Texas state government like a lot of people did. I was an intern while I was in college over the Texas Capitol. That was in the mid-90s, in 1995. Worked for several members of the legislature, got the chance to work with several state agencies. And in 2007, I began my tenure here at TDLR. I've actually worked here twice. I was here from 2007 to 2012 as a government relations officer. I returned in 2017 as, again, to government relations. And then in September of 2023, I was named Deputy Executive Director.
Very cool. Yeah, it reminds me of, I think it was Steve Jobs at Apple. He leaves Apple for a little while, and then they just couldn't stand to not have him, so they bring him back.
That's the exact. I was fortunate enough to be able to come back. Yeah, it worked out very well.
Cool. So the TDLR, licensing and regulation. It seems obvious, I think. What licensing and regulation, but can you give a little bit of background on sort of like what y'all do?
Absolutely.
Overall, like what the scope of things is.
Absolutely. Like all state agencies, TDLR was created by the legislature. Okay, so we are in Chapter 51 of the Occupations Code, creates the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. And our history goes back over 150 years. We were created in the early 1900s. Yeah, we're one of the first and earliest state agencies. We were created in the early 1900s as the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and then we became the Texas Bureau of Labor Standards, and then in the late 90s, the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. And what that law says, if you go and look it up, is that we're basically the state's regulatory agency. We don't have every single regulatory license in the state, but many of them. And currently, we've got 38 programs. And those are assigned to us by the Texas legislature. So one thing I always want people to understand is it's not like we sit around and say, what should we regulate or what shouldn't we do or what does it require to get this license? Yeah. All of those, and I'm pointing across the street because our office is next door to the governor's mansion, and I'm pointing over at the Texas Capitol.
Sure.
Because our state legislature, again, they're the ones who decide what the laws are going to say. And what the programs are going to be that we regulate. Like a lot of agencies, we're overseen by the Texas Commission of Licensing and Regulation. And the commission consists of 7 members. They're not allowed to have any financial interest in the programs we regulate. And those 7 members are appointed by the governor of Texas and confirmed by the Texas Senate. And basically, they have 2 main jobs. And again, this is all outlined and specified in Chapter 51 of the Occupations Code. Their 7 members do a couple things. First of all, they hire our executive director, who then hires the rest of the staff. And then they actually adopt administrative rules. And this is similar to a lot of state agencies. The legislature will prescribe a program, for example, our electricians program. If you're going to do certain work, a license is required by law. And then the commission will come and adopt rules that specify the types of things like the exams you'll need to take, the types of forms and information you'll need to provide to us on our applications, and what the fees are going to be. to receive that license.
Yeah. So in the case of like electricians, they need to, they need to know, they need to have a license, right? To sort of, I guess, show
Absolutely,
that they
yes.
have. And I think most people know that. We all have horror stories, maybe of someone we know somewhere that got an unlicensed electrician or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
but who writes the, like, you take a test, I assume, to do this.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
how does the test get written? Who's writing that?
That's a great question, Brad. This It's really exciting. The way we do it is we convene what we call, of course, every group has acronyms, so I'll start out by saying out the full thing. Subject matter experts, or
Okay.
SMEs. We will actually convene groups of licensees and subject matter experts, and then we work with a third-party vendor to actually administer the exams. And what that does is it allows Texans all over the state to either go to a location, or depending on the type of the test, they may be able to take it from home.
Yep.
And we work with that group I'll use a big word called psychometrics. Psychometrics is basically the science of creating a good exam or a good test. It's used in education settings across from kindergarten all the way through a PhD in college. And we use that in our exams as well to say, okay, what's the type of material they need to understand? How do you ask these questions? And then you study the questions. Is everyone getting this question right? Maybe it's too easy. Is everyone getting this question wrong? Maybe it's too hard. And we'll work through that to come up with a good, what we call bank of questions
Yep.
that tests what the applicant needs to know. And then they'll determine what's called the cut score. How many questions do you need to get right to pass, and et cetera. It's a really neat way of making sure that we're asking the right questions, that we've got the right mix of questions, and that it really is testing what needs to be tested, because all of our programs, there's differences in the requirements among the statutes, but basically they're all set up to set a floor, right? A minimum level of competency that one is required to have before they can pursue these professions.
Yeah. So, I kind of want to ask, like, I guess these are everyday Texans, right? I mean, I don't want to I'm an everyday Texan, but I don't want to be an electrician. I don't think it's
Right.
maybe too late in my life, but how does this stuff sort of affect like the everyday Texan? I'm not an electrician, but you've got regulations, stuff like that. So how does that work?
Right. Well, I'd say, Brad, you're affected because you may have to hire an electrician or an air conditioning contractor to make some repairs at your home.
Yeah.
And the point of the statute and what we need to carry out is what we want to make sure that the person who's going out there has a license, meets the requirements, and is qualified for your health and safety. Obviously, electricians, you can cause fire
Yeah.
if you don't know what you're doing. Air conditioning contractors, if you don't know what you're doing in setting up an AC system and setting up the size of that system properly for your home or your business and its size, you can have issues that cause economic or health and safety problems
Yeah.
down
Yeah.
the line. So that's really it's about protecting the public health and safety. Couple of other examples. One of the things we regulate is fuel pumps.
Yeah.
When you go to fill up with gas, are you getting the proper amount of gas that the meter says? If you paid for the premium gas, is it really the premium gas? Those types of things affect people every day. If you go to a shopping center or an office building and you get on an elevator or an escalator, if you need to have your car towed for some reason, if you go to the store and you buy what's called an extended warranty, or in the legal world, what's called a service contract. You may go to Best Buy and buy a new television, and they'll say the warranty by this particular manufacturer is 2 years.
Yeah.
Well, for this additional fee, you can add on 3 or 4 years to that. That's also something we regulate. So there's an array of things that where we're sort of behind the scenes that
Yeah.
consumers might not see every day, where we're there to help, again, protect the health, safety, and welfare of Texans.
And I mean, I have to ask because I've always wondered this since I've filled up my own gas tank. How often does it happen? I think there's a sticker there on the gas.
Yep.
Like if you whatever. If you think that something's wrong, call, I guess y'all.
Call and file a complaint. That's right.
How often does that happen that, I'm filling up with, what's the premium? 91, 93,
93. Yeah,
93? I'm filling up with 93, but what I'm really getting is 87.
it can happen. And
How do you
what's
know?
required? Well, we ask the public to, someone might notice a performance issue in their engine
Yeah.
and have suspicions. But what we really rely on the public and ask the public to help us out by going into our website and filing a complaint.
Yeah.
And we investigate every complaint that's filed to try to determine it.
Yeah.
Um,
My Hyundai is not running like a Ferrari, so I might need to
yeah,
file that
yeah,
thing.
yeah, or vice versa.
So, how do y'all balance regulation, regulations and everything like that? They're obviously required for
Mhm.
safety and a lot of different reasons. And Texas also, prides itself in being a business-friendly state. How do y'all
Absolutely.
balance this out?
Absolutely. Well, and that's a philosophy that our commissioners bring with them to when they perform their jobs here during our commission meetings and as representatives of our agency. The legislature has told us, here's a program, here's how we want you to regulate it. And basically, we want you to be protect the public, protect health and safety, but have common sense, right? You'll see one great example. You'll see that our commission works to lower the fees that
Yeah.
we have to charge to licensees. They may get into a case where someone has accused a licensee of doing something. We've made an investigation and made our determination, and then they'll say, has this happened often?
Yeah.
How severe was this? So that when someone is penalized, it's either, we might not go for revoking a license right away. We'll go for a monetary penalty to make sure that someone gets the message and corrects their action in the front. But you'll see a philosophy at our commission of protect the public, but balance that out with fair common sense, because we're a state that's open for business, and
Yeah.
we want that regulatory burden to be low. We want to make sure that when we're asking you questions on an application, that those are tied to the statute, right?
Yeah.
To the law
Yeah.
or the rules. We're not going to ask you, what color are your tow trucks, for example, to come up
Sure.
with something, because that's not anything that's required in the statute. So we don't want you to be burdened beyond what the statute requires.
Yeah. So, I mean, a recent Supreme Court case, I think it's Chevron deference or whatever, that was overturned.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
I know it's big on the federal level. It's saying that, I guess the judges are responsible for interpreting the law, not the regulators.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, I think that was kind of a big deal on the federal level. And I'm wondering if it has any effect on Texas regulations.
I think it's too early to say from our point of view at TDLR. Like, I'll just point out a couple things, like you did mention, it is federal. And I'll tell you that our statutes, our laws that we regulate, that our legislature passes, they're pretty clear.
Yeah.
The legislature will be pretty clear on defining the activity.
Yeah.
For example, electric work.
Yeah.
And then also providing exemptions. There's two sides to every program that we regulate. There's the definition of what the activity is, and then there's the exemption. Let me give you a couple of examples.
Okay.
In the electrician program, if you're allowed to work on your own house.
Okay.
Right. So Brad, if one of your outlets goes out and you want to work on it and you feel like you're competent enough to do that, you're allowed to do that. The law in Texas is going to let you work on your own home.
Probably not
Now,
a good idea, but I could.
What you can't do is go to your neighbors and say, "Hey, I did this. I'll charge you $100 to do it, for you."
Yeah.
You can't do that without a license. But there are some exemptions. The work that electrical work done in the industrial plants that we see up and down the coast, those are built in and exempt. The work that is done on farms and ranches is exempt. So again, that's where you'll see some of that common sense that I talked about built in. To say, overall, this is the work that is covered, and then here's some exemptions.
Okay. So y'all have a new strategic, I think it's called the strategic plan and supplemental schedule.
Yep.
And I think it outlines what y'all are planning to do between 2025 and 2029. So 5 years.
Right.
Correct? So I mean, I guess, what is the strategic plan? I think it's kind of interesting that you guys have one.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm glad that as an organization that I pay taxes to as a strategic plan. But what is it?
Thank you. Yeah, no, thanks for noticing that. It's something that the private sector uses. And the short answer is there are several reasons that we do our strategic plan.
Okay.
One, it's required by the law.
Okay.
The governor's office reaches out to every state agency and provides instructions and details, and more importantly, the due date of when our strategic plans need to be turned in. And like a business, a state agency, the point of our strategic plans is to look forward. Where have we been? Where have we going? And then one of the most important things and things I'm excited about that we do here at TDLR is we go out on the road. So for this strategic plan, we went out to 4 cities across the state. We let our licensees and the public know, hey, we're going to be out. We're going to be there talking to you, and we're going to ask you a few questions. What are we doing well? What do you think we could do better? If you were the king or queen for a day and I gave you a magic wand,
Yeah.
what law or rule would you change and say,
Okay.
hey, this really makes sense or doesn't make sense? And then finally, we ask them, over the next 5 years, what do you see happening in your industry? What do we need to start thinking about as licensees? What do we need to share with the legislature that's coming up in your industry that's new? And then what might they need to consider for possible law changes? Obviously, as an agency, we're not allowed to quote unquote lobby, but we provide information and we can provide suggestions and we can say, hey, these are our observations. So all that rolls into our strategic plan, which again, we don't want to make it burdensome. It's 52 pages,
Yeah.
very well spaced. We've got some pictures, we've got some graphs, but what we want to do is tell our story. We want the citizens and those that are impacted to be able to see who we are and what we do and how we want to carry out our vision and our mission. One thing that is my favorite that we highlight is we run ourselves with some core values. We want to be accountable to Texans. We want to provide excellent customer service. We work together as a team with our licensees to provide that best service. And so those things are all outlined in our strategic plan. And a couple of things that you'll see is strategic initiatives. This is at the end of the plan, and it's suggestions to the legislature on things we've observed for possible consideration of things they might want to look at in the statutes.
Okay.
For example, one that I'm pretty excited about is last session in our electricians program and in our air conditioning program, there were some provisions made that created some alternatives paths aimed at high school students who may not be going on to college, so that when they start high school, by the time they finish, they can be well along their careers, either in the electrical field or the air conditioning field. And those are 2 fields. One thing that I like to say about our industries, we regulate transportation network companies, Uber and Lyft.
Yeah.
And that represented what some call a disruption or an interruption or a new way of thinking into the sort of taxi model, right? The old way of doing things. Well, there's not going to be a disruption, I don't see, or anything similar to our largest program, cosmetology.
Yeah.
Hair, for some of us, hair's not going to stop growing. Okay, no offense to you. No, seriously, people are going to want to get their hair done, their nails done for a long time. Here in Texas, we're going to need cool air in the summer and heat in the winters, no matter what. We're going to need electrical work, no matter what. We're going to have advances in solar and batteries, et cetera. But at the end of the day, there's going to need to be connections made to electrical systems. So those things aren't going to go away, is really the point I want to make. And those populations continue to grow. And those are great jobs, right? We're growing in the state of Texas. Businesses are moving here. People are moving here. Houses are being built. Office buildings are being built. And each of those things require a safe and skilled workforce.
Yeah.
And so what we said in our strategic initiative, to close the loop on that, is, hey, maybe instead of having to do it for each of these programs, consider some broad authority where we could enter into agreements with technical schools or others to create these pathways for young folks who want to get into these careers.
I think that's a really cool idea. That's interesting. I'll have to follow along and see how that works out. Why is
Please
it
do.
that cosmetology, every time conversations about regulations and licensing and stuff like that comes up, cosmetology seems to be the most common example. I know that we've talked about electricians a lot in this show,
Yeah,
and I don't know why. Is it because that there's so many? Like it's just
I
like,
would say, yeah, just population numbers. That's our biggest program.
yeah,
That's about 300,000 licensees. And when I talk about licensees, I'm talking about people and places. If you look at just to back up quickly, if
sure.
you look at our total population, it's almost a million. And again, that's people, places, and things. So people, it's going to be your cosmetologists, your operators. It's going to be the salons, the nail salons, the hair salons. And then
Yeah,
it's also going to be the equipment. We mentioned elevators and escalators.
yeah.
Also, another really important one. It's amazing the stuff that I've learned, first of all, since I started working here. Again, it's stuff we touch and interact with every day, but we don't think about it.
Sure.
Boilers in our apartment complexes, in our office buildings. Anytime you turn on a faucet and hot water comes out, there's a boiler. They are extremely convenient and extremely dangerous
Yeah, yeah,
if not properly maintained.
sure.
Um,
And I was reading that y'all, one of your in this strategic plan, or you're looking forward at the 89th legislature. There's some concern about cosmetologists performing medical procedures. Is that?
yes,
Yeah.
that's an important line that we want to make sure doesn't get crossed.
And what
And
kind of
really,
medical procedures are they getting? Are they running into?
what you'll see things basically overall the line between the line stops for our folks if you're going to break the skin,
Yeah,
right? So a Botox injection
sure.
or something like that where you're breaking the layer of the skin, that's going to cross outside the realm of our licensees into other professions. And we want to make sure that our licensees understand where their authority ends and someone else's begins.
Okay.
Again, that is solely focused on safety.
Yeah.
We are not teaching in our cosmetology and barber programs. We're teaching sanitation and safety, but not, once you start cutting skin, then you're more into the medical
Yeah, I
fields.
don't, I guess if I were the type of person to get Botox, I know it looks like I probably do it all the time, but if I was the type of person to do that, then I would want to go to someone that knew what they were doing, that had
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
uh,
That's
yeah.
the big part behind that initiative. Yes, sir.
So how is licensing and regulation going to change in the next 5 years with this strategic plan?
That's a very good question. I don't know for sure. First of all, any changes, major changes will come from the legislature.
Okay.
I see a couple of things that are possibly on the horizon for change and things that are happening over the next 5 years. We just recently got a new program last session that 10 years ago, we didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
Electric vehicle charging stations.
Yeah.
We're getting more and more electric vehicles. The federal government is spending a lot of money on making sure that electric vehicle charging stations are out there. And similar to the fuel pumps, we want to make sure that you're getting what you pay for and that these things are safe.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the change comes with changes in technology.
Yeah. Yeah. If it says it's a rapid charging station, it better be rapid, right?
How rapid is it going to be? And if
Yeah.
it says it's open, if you show up at 10:30 at night or 6 in the morning or whenever, is it really on? Is it available to you when it was advertised to be?
Yeah. So, when all these, the rules and regulations and stuff like that, I was reading through the strategic plan a little bit, and I think there's some mention of like sunsetting rules. And I think that you guys let some things sunset, which means, I guess it's antiquated, or the timeline. Well, how do I explain this? You explain it. You're better at it.
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about the sunset process, which is
Yeah.
it's a great process we have here in the state of Texas. Every about 11 years or so, every state agency goes through a review by a different state agency, the Texas Sunset Commission.
Okay.
They basically look at the agency and ask a couple questions. When were you created? Why were you created? And are you still needed? And overall, the answers to those questions for us were yes. If you go back to, I mentioned at the beginning, chapter 51 of the Occupations Code, that used to say that our agency basically was going to be dissolved in the year 2021. In the year 2021, we went through the sunset process, which again, like of all the other changes that happened to us, a bill is filed in the Texas legislature and it has to pass both chambers, be approved by the governor. Then that statute now says, or chapter 51 now says that the agency exists until 2033. And that's the same for each agency. You'll find that they end in statute unless they're continued.
Yeah.
And so the Sunset Commission recommended and the legislature agreed that we should continue. However, some tweaks were made. Couple of important ones. The old law used to say that we were going to inspect every single cosmetology salon, nail salon, hair salon, anywhere that's licensed by us every 2 years. The new law said, you know what, don't do that. If somebody's been perfect for 5 years in a row, maybe do a quick, type desk audit or a quick check-in, but you don't have to do a full inspection.
Yeah.
If somebody's had some complaints or penalties or fines, a bunch of them in the past couple of years, maybe you want to look at them every 6 months.
Yeah.
Or every year. And so that allows us to try to balance that workload of the large population in that program to focus on where the real risks are and let those who don't have issues have fewer inspections.
Yeah.
So that's an example of a sunset recommendation. There are also other examples where other agencies have been dissolved and we've been given their duties. The Board of Tax Professional Examiners. These are across all your counties. You've got tax assessors and tax collectors who work for your central appraisal districts. They're the ones who send out your tax notices for your property taxes that you're going to pay. We license them. The law says that they need to have a license with certain education requirements and experience requirements in order to perform those duties. That all used to be done by a completely separate state agency. That state agency went through its sunset process many years ago now, and those questions were asked. Why were you created? Okay, to oversee this. Do you still need to exist?
Yeah.
Yeah, the duties still need to exist, but you don't need to be your own agency.
Yeah.
And part of the benefit and the consolidation that we see there are there's only one executive director now. You don't need two. There's one general counsel. There's one enforcement division. There's one licensing division. And so that's an example where through the sunset process, one agency was dissolved, but their duties continued under TDLR. And you'll see that a lot. One interesting page that you and your listeners may find helpful when talking about our agency specifically is if you go to our homepage and you scroll down toward the middle, there's an entire history of our agency that talks about some of these highlights that I've mentioned.
Cool. So when it comes to the 89th legislature, which I believe starts in February?
January of 2025. Yep, they meet once every 2 years for 140 days. And it can get a little chaotic, but.
Oh, yes, it can. So what is do y'all have some goals for this? I mean, I think the strategic plan sort of maybe directs y'all. So what are y'all your goals in the 89th legislature?
A couple of big goals are we received some funding last session to modernize our licensing system. Yeah. As we've gotten older and as we've taken on these other programs from other agencies, our infrastructure that we use to issue licenses, to review applications, et cetera, it's pretty outdated. So we got some funding and we want to make sure that continues through the next 2 years so that we can fully implement that. We've got the strategic initiatives that we listed that we're interested in seeing if the legislature wants to pursue those. But really the main thing is Our executive director at the beginning of the session will be testifying about our budget requests
Yeah.
to the Senate Finance Committee and the House Appropriations Committee. And those are two of the biggest things that we want to get done is make sure that our budget's funded at a levels appropriate so we can keep the workload up, keep up with the workload to meet the needs of Texans, and also make sure that we're paying a competitive salary so that we can keep employees retained.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the, modernize, keeping your systems modern and everything like that with, making sure it's easy for people to get not
We
easy for them to get the license, but easy for them to apply for it and things like that.
Absolutely. Easier
Yeah.
for them to apply. We want to, unfortunately, because of our systems, there are still some programs where we have to take a check or a money order, and we're not available yet
A
to
money
offer those
order?
things online. I know. It sounds so antiquated, but that's where we're really going to make some catch up and see some growth.
Y'all still take faxes?
No, we stopped. We turned off the fax machine, so we've gotten that far.
Okay, cool. I think I see
Yeah.
a VHS player there in the background.
No, stop.
So I'm just kidding. So and just I appreciate you taking the time to do all this. There's a few more things that a couple more
Yeah,
things to
please.
ask you about before I let you go. In the strategic plan, I found it very interesting that you guys are involved in, I guess, preventing human trafficking, which I think is
Yeah.
as a licensing and regulation department. That's not something that I would
Hmm.
have expected, but I think it kind of makes sense. Can you explain some of the work y'all do?
Sure. No, and your observation is spot on, Brad. I'd say that really began, as I said, through the sunset process, we can be assigned programs. And several years ago, we were assigned about 14 health programs from the Department of State Health Services. And one of those was the massage therapy program. And as we got that program and we started learning about the licensing aspects of it and then the enforcement side, we quickly saw that unfortunately, in the massage program, more than I'd say probably any other program that we regulate, you have some really good actors
Yeah,
and some awful, horrible, illegal actors committing really horrific acts.
sure.
We've got uh, violate, prostitution,
Yeah,
human trafficking, some really horrible things. And it's actually a very interesting the way this came out. It was during one of at the beginning of a session, several sessions ago, during that testimony for our budget in the Senate Finance Committee, I believe it was, when the senators asked, "What more do you need?
yeah,
What can you do to help prevent this?" And we're not a law enforcement agency, and
yeah,
we don't want to be. We're an administrative agency, but we recognize that we're seeing so much of this. So our job, we worked with the Senate Finance Committee. They wanted to give us money, and we outlined some parameters on how to do that to help identify and partner with law enforcement and with organizations whose job it is to connect those victims with those services. So we're not necessarily there. We're definitely not there to arrest people, but we are there to help bridge that gap between the licensee or someone who's being trafficked by a licensee or someone operating an illegal establishment and law enforcement and those groups who are able to help victims of trafficking. So it's really created a new book of business,
yeah,
for lack of a better word, for us. That's been very interesting. We've partnered with law enforcement across the state to help them shut down places and get services for victims who we're able to identify. It's
yeah,
a very different type of investigation and inspection than, say, an allegation of illegal or unlicensed electrical work or air conditioning work, because we are, unfortunately, folks can really be brainwashed and manipulated, and they may be reluctant to receive help.
yeah,
Unfortunately, is something that we've seen, but we are there. We're doing what we can. We've got a great track record of success so far in at least helping to identify and connect victims with services, and then shut down. If you'll take a look at our press releases, we've had several high-profile cases where it's not just us. In El Paso, we worked with the district attorney's office there to give them the information they need from the licensing side to
Yeah.
be able to shut some places down.
Yeah, it seems like you'll have a unique sort of angle on all of that, being the ones that
Yes,
license it and everything like that. So that makes sense. That's really cool that y'all do that.
absolutely. Thank you.
Oh, and I mean, I have to ask this just because I think it's kind of interesting as I was looking through y'all's strategic plan, and I'm looking at,
Sure.
there's a lot of cosmetologists, electricians, air conditioning,
Yep.
all of that, barbers, stuff that we would expect. And I'm getting down to the bottom and I see
Okay.
weather modification, and there's 12 business
Sure.
licenses for weather modification. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think the last I know I think there's cloud seeding. I think they did that in the
That
Beijing Olympics.
Well, there's some cloud seeding that we've done here, and then there's also some hail suppression efforts that may take place. But basically, what permits, those 12 permits allow folks within the permit area. Um, it's actually a very old science, and the idea is that when you have a rain cloud that's fertile enough to produce rain, there are actually enhancements that we can take. Cloud seeding is the main one to produce more rain
Yeah.
out of a cloud than otherwise would happen. It's ripe for skepticism. Obviously, there's a lot of folks who are doubters out there, but we've got some experts on staff, and especially in our weather modification advisory committee, they've got some real data that shows some significant impact.
Yeah.
And it's something that takes place all over the world. Again, it's one of those that I learned a lot about when I started working at TDLR that I had no idea about before. But again, what we try to do and what I encourage people to do is go to our webpage, even if you don't never intend to get a license or apply for a license or even use this. We've got some great folks who work very hard to use plain language,
Yeah.
to understand and explain what these programs are and how they work. It has nothing to do with airplanes or streaks you might see in the sky. It's not harmful to
Sure.
humans. We do get a lot of concern about that. It's
Yeah.
designed to help, again, produce more rain than otherwise we would have, something we always need more of.
Well, I'm looking at it. There's only 12 business licenses in Texas.
Yeah,
It sounds like there's maybe a business opportunity there. Maybe
there could be.
maybe there needs to be a
Absolutely.
13th or 14th. I don't know.
There are associations who are working on this. I would encourage you to look them up. But yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
Steve, Bruno, I really appreciate you taking the time. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we go?
No, I just really appreciate you reaching out to us. As we've talked about, we are an agency that somehow Texans and those who are visiting our state are probably going to interact with while they're here. And
Yeah.
any chance we get, we love to tell our story, encourage the public to do a couple things. Visit our website to learn more about us. Visit our website to file a complaint if you have a concern about a service you've received, or if you're concerned about unlicensed activity. And then also you can visit a website before you hire an electrician or an air conditioning contractor. Go on our site, make sure they have a license. You can also go on our site and see if they have any previous violations. So become an informed consumer and let us know if you have a concern, are the main things I'd like to share.
Well, Steve Bruno with the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, I really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Brad. And happy 4th of July to you and to all the listeners.